Okay, a little late, but thought I'd get a video out for .13. It's been out for, about a week now, I guess. Not a lot of groundbreaking changes here, but we'll cover them off as best we can. Starting from the bottom, if the Windows hardware video render fails, what was happening was people would get really long render times, and if you looked at your logs, it was flooded with hardware video render problems. This was a issue with file preferences. I think it's other. You have hardware video decoding, and for some reason, maybe it's failing on your install, or it couldn't find the video card or something, and it wasn't reverting back to basically turning it off, reverting it back to the software video decoding. So Scott put in that feature that says if I'm having an issue, roll back and just use a typical software render, so it wouldn't kill your render times. Bulk edit missing in the layout tab. So in the layout tab, this was a result of a change I'd made. Consequences was that the bulk edit was missing from here, and Scott added this back in. So now you have your bulk edit when you select a group in the layout tab. So that's back in. Two simple things. Oh, I should mention that for people that are upgrading from many releases prior, there was a known issue, and the symptoms are when you go to start xLights, all you get is the xLights logo, and then it quietly goes back to your Windows. It never actually starts xLights. So I just want to remind people that if that's the case, reboot your machine first of all, but also go into xlights.org. You shouldn't have had to do this, but we find that some cases you still go to the downloads tab. Again, this is a result of something a couple releases ago, but if you're moving forward and this is the first time you've upgraded in a while, you may need to go and install this piece here, Microsoft Visual C Redistributable. It is a Microsoft package that is basically at the core of xLights. So that was updated a couple releases ago. You may need to do that, and that will require a reboot. That should solve the problem where the logo shows up. Other than that, there's no real known issues so far. I've got 13 in terms of severe problems. No big fixes. So continue to move ahead. Scott has fixed some issues with Experience Lights Genius controllers. I think it was a case of the outputs were being slightly misaligned. It doesn't really stop it from working, but it could affect some of the frames per second that you're seeing because of the misconfiguration there. So that should be addressed now. I think we had a couple people confirm that. And Alex has done a reset to the moving head panel, so I will create a quick empty sequence here. And it doesn't really matter where I drop this, so just ignore the fact that I'm like placing it on some crazy group here, but it doesn't matter. What was happening was you could come to the status page and reset to default. It wasn't resetting everything across the board, including all of these things. So that's been corrected. So a reset to default actually happens here. I think there's also a right-click option here. I could be wrong. Reset effect. So that should also clear out previous settings. So that's been addressed there with that one. Keith has added a little performance gain here for sparse custom models. So that means like really large props that have lots of white space. So think of your spinner type things, right? So here I got a spinner. If I click on this, click on the model data, and click there, make it bigger. You can see it's 108 by 108, but there's a lot of empty space in here. That's actually getting stored in your RGBFX file, if I'm correct, the RGBFX file, and also internally in xLights. So it's a lot of extra space. And quite frankly, there's a warning about it in your check sequence that says, you have an overly large model that maybe you want to consider making smaller. You can do that to help a little bit as well by doing shrink space, 50%. Keep an eye on this down here. Make sure it's not changing, too much. You don't want to make it so small that it comes down to 1 pixel, but you might take an advantage of at least shrinking it by 50%. But internally now, it is being stored in a tighter model in a compressed format. So that's available, and with no repercussions in terms of going backwards or forwards. So you can still import models from previous versions. You can still export this model and go back to other versions. So that's as well. Dan has done something when splitting. In effect, use the location of the mouse as the split point. I have not seen this or used this, but I'm guessing that if you did something like this and you did right click and you did split, we would get 2 right down the middle, right? So now let's go here, click here on the left thing, and we'll see how, we got to click just one of them. Over here, and I'm gonna assume we're gonna get a 1 and a 3 here. Yep, there you go. So you can split it where you want it based on where the mouse is pointed. So that's a new feature. Dan's done some work that, quite frankly, I really can't speak to. I think Dan Culp has done some videos on this, servo effects and some support from stuff there. I think I can. I think is it just a DMX effect? I'm totally wrong. Where is there a servo? Piano servo is this guy. There we go. So I'll just speak to the feature. I really don't know how it works, but here's the link and the link end. I think if you were doing 2 of these back to back, and I'm sorry, I'm just sort of guessing at this, and you put another one here, you could say that this one is linked the end to the start of this one so that it won't reset. It'll flow from one movement to another. Think of animated mouths or skulls and that sort of thing. I think that's the goal. Be sure and play around with that or look for a video. I think Dan probably has a video on that as well. Ability to add open packages. This was a feature that maybe caused a little confusion. There was a small bug fix to go along with it, but I'll bring over my File Explorer. So in the past, you would have had a .zip file where vendors would provide the zip or a package of sequence. And if you double clicked it, it would just be a normal zip file. It would open up all the files and it would, show you everything in the file. But what Keith has done, and I really don't want to show it here, but what Keith has done is added a new version of it. So XSQZ, which is really just a zip file. I could go in here and rename it back to a zip file, and it would be still a zip file. But by doing this, by having its own unique file type, first of all, you'll notice it's got the Nutcracker icon, so you know it's something different. It unfortunately has the exact same icon as the XSQ. Maybe we can get that updated with something like a zipper across his mouth or something to indicate a little bit different. But what that means is now you can double click this and it will open another version of xLights pointed to that show folder, so you can quickly get a the vendor's version of that sequence without having to do temporary show folder, open it, close, unzip it, all those extra steps can be alleviated. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Just double click it, and you can't save it. You can't do anything weird with it, but you can quickly see the vendor's sequence in its native form in the vendor's layout, and no risk to your show folder and forgetting your temporary show folder, etc. Another point on this was there was a version. I don't think it actually, well, it did go out for those early adopters where the zip file was being converted to an xLights file. So what would happen was you'd see a Nutcracker icon for all of your zips, whether or not they were xLights sequences or not. So that was causing people issues. The quick fix for that is, I believe, just go to Properties and Change, and just set it back to File Explorer, right? It's probably set to xlights.exe. And let me just show you that. I think that's what it would be. So you notice all of my zip files now have the Nutcracker icon, and that's going to mess you up for anything non-xlights related. So go right click, Properties, Change, File Explorer. There you go. Click on that. And similarly, for an XSQZ file, you could do the exact same thing, although xLights is going to do this for you. You could say, open with. You could choose xLights and say always use xLights to open the xsq.z file. Okay, so that's there. In case you see any of them, oops, I guess I went and kicked it off. So it'll start off in the background. That's there for in the future. If you happen to come across those files, you'll know what they mean. And that's this one. Change the package sequence default extension to XSQ. So when you do a file or tools package sequence, that's fine. It's going to give you a choice. By default, it's going to do an XSQZ file, Z file, Z file. Sorry, I'm Canadian. But you can overwrite it and say, you can still store this as a zip file if you really want to. So that's that. Add ability to rename controller model name. Scott, what is that? Controller model name. I'm sorry, I do not. I'm guessing. I'm sorry. I don't know what that is. Well, maybe I'll put something in the notes if I can find that. Add, undo, redo to custom model auto increment. So if you were to create a custom model, that's this guy here, drag and drop. And then you go into model data, click on that guy, make it bigger. We've got a grid by default of 5 by 5. You can say active, auto increment. This feature here allows you to basically, when you start clicking, it will auto increment them back in. Now he's saying he has done add an undo custom model auto increment. So let me just do a control Z, control Z. There you go. It goes back one. Oh, okay. So if you click the wrong thing, you could do a control Z or control Z and go back and replace it to where you want it to be. Before you would have to come down here, turn off the auto increment, turn off the active, turn off the channel, all that kind of stuff. So that's a nice little feature there for people making custom models. Pete is working on the xLights controllers. So some issues with that. I believe that's a new controller out in the UK. So if you have one of those, look forward to using that. Scott has added the auto shutter to the moving head effect only for color wheels. So if you have a color wheel, and I go to the sequencer, here we go, and controls. Oh, wait, okay, it's not going to work unless I put it on a moving head. So let me go down, find my moving head here. Here we go. Drop a moving head effect, and it's there. Click on that. Now I have a color wheel. So if you have a color wash, or if you want to do a color wash, you would click on number 1. So the first color is that, and number 2. Oops, sorry, do that. Number 1 is there. Shift, click this will be number 2. So it's going to fade from 1 over to 2. But with a color wheel, it's really just spinning a wheel. So you're going to get an unknown state as it flips between the two. So Scott has added an auto shutter. So you click on that auto shutter. And then in your layout, be sure to have there's a delay. I'm thinking it's under color. Yeah, color wheel delay. So if you set like 10 milliseconds, there'll be a 10 millisecond pause in the dimmer as the wheel spins between the two color choices. So it's going to go from 1 to 2 in the middle of this effect, but with a 10 millisecond where it's going to stop the shutter, so there's no light coming through, and then flip it over to red. Something else as we side note here. So holding the shift, you can click around. You can make it do 4 different colors. If you want to remove a color, select it and hit the delete key, and that will take out a color. If you're trying to work on a design that flips between 2 different colors on the color wheel for a moving head. So that is that, and that wraps up. That's everything for 13. And there's a few changes coming up in 14 that we'll cover off when that gets released. I'm hoping to do a small what I know about advanced moving head effect video shortly. So keep your eyes open for that. We've been playing with it, trying to figure out best practices and where to go from there, how to make use of it. So be sure and watch out for that. All right, thanks a lot. See you next time.